Welcome to the Holocaust podcast. This is class number 5 in the discourse Mimana Afar Yakov, which is the 8th discourse in the overall book, Bishasha Hegdimu. This is going to be the 5th class in this discourse, but also the 5th class in chapter 29. Okay. So in last class, we were just dealing with the parentheses over here in the middle of chapter 29, where the subject matter in general was the idea that there are 3 stages in the light, 3 stages in the emergence of the Or Pnimi, the internal light, as it originates within pure infinity of the Ein Sof. So first there is the idea of the 10 spheres Agnuzais, the 10 hidden spheros, which that begins to kind of become pronounced, if you might say, within the Or Ein Sof itself. When there is the Alosa Ratzon, when there is the will to create worlds, or when there is the Hashara, where there is the estimation, so to speak, where God is estimating him. So we're going to learn in the next chapter what's the meaning of this word estimation, that it's not the estimation of the vessels, it's the estimation of the lights. Very important distinction, but we're going to get to that as Hashem probably in the next class. But over here, there is that estimation, and that kind of begins to develop within the Ein Sof a limited potential as opposed to a limitless potential. But however, since this limited potential is happening within an infinite being, within that infinite energy, within that infinite light, we're learning that the lights, when they are in this stage, these esespheros, when they are in this stage, we learned are in a stage of antuchad. They're totally, number one, they are one with their source, and number two, they're one with each other. There is undifferentiatable and indetectable within them 10 various different powers. Although they're there, but as he uses the term, they're chad be'etzem. They're totally unified be'etzem, in essence, in this very, very elevated, lofty state. Everything is perfectly one with the Ein Sof. And the second stage is already when the lights emerge outward. That's after the tzimtzum. And there's the first revelation of the light. But the second level, as we're going to see now, is before those lights settle in the vessels. So that's going to be that's really what we're going to learn about today. And that's a state where there is already there is already 10 sphirot. You can see 10. The oneness goes away. But they're still unified. They're no more in a state of yachid, of chad, but they're still in a state of echad. They're still unified with the pure or. And that's the reason why you can't, the state of the sphirot, and we didn't learn this about this yet. We're going to learn about it in today's class, but I'm just saying it just briefly as something, is that the lights are in this state, the sphirot are still belima, which means they don't have any substance, although we can call it already, we can name already 10 spheros, chachma, bina, das, but they're still undefinable and even indescribable as chachma, so forth, as we're going to see. It's chachma, but it's not chachma. It's bina, but it's not bina. It's chesed, but it's not chesed. It's still very, very much in a state of utter pshitus and simplicity, where the lights cannot really be characterized in a certain characterization that we can define. And then, of course, the third level of those lights is when those lights descend into vessels, and the vessels really take hold of the light, like we learned in the beginning of this chapter, and they assimilate the light into the vessels, and then the lights become far more definable and specified in their own particular specification. Okay, in the parentheses that we learned in last class number 4, we discussed that this first level, we said, is called Yachid, Chad, or Antu Chad, you are one. It's not referring to God as he is completely above spheros. For that, you don't have to say that you are one. Why would you think anything other than one? But we're talking about already a level where there is 10 spheros, but the 10 are not 10. They're not only are they in a state of echad, of oneness, they're in a state of yachid, singular. There's nothing other than infinite light. So we asked the question, if you remember, that earlier we learned that on this level is called already names. It's not called name. It's not Shmo HaGadol, his name. It's Shemos, many names. So how can we say it many if we're saying it's one? And he brought, and then so in order to explain that, he brought. I'm re-chewing this idea for a moment because I just want to clarify one point. And then he explained that, and to further the question, he says in Shar HaYichud, which is a book of the Mittler Rebbe, over there, he speaks about this level called Hashara B'Koyach, where God already estimates, evaluates the lights of creation, which this evaluation process is, as we're discussing right now. This is the bringing forth of the Esses Spheres Agnuzais. This is it's the same idea as Alois Haratzon, is the will, the rousing of the will within the Ein Sof, already to limit himself to a creation. This level, says in Shara Yichud, is not only is it not called Yachid anymore, not only is it not called singular, it's not even called Echad anymore. It's not even, we can't even apply oneness to it. Rather, this stage is called Kadmon. It predates creation, it's above creation, it's primordial, but we cannot refer to it anymore as one because it went out of oneness. And it definitely went out of singularity. And here we're saying that this level is called one. So how do we settle this contradiction? So the idea that we explained earlier was with the phrase of Yiddish that we said Venzich v'meret, depending on which level we're talking, which, just to simplify it, would mean something like this. The microscope that is used in pre-tzimtzum is a complete different microscope than the microscope that we are using in post-tzimtzum. In the pre-tzimtzum intense microscope, to pass the test of oneness, the requirements, the level of requirement to be considered one is such a high standard that this Esses Spheres Agnuzais, the 10 hidden spheros that are embedded in the Ein Sof, will not only will they not pass the test of Yachid, of absolute oneness with the Ein Sof, but they will not even pass the test of Echad, because the requirement, the expectation of oneness before the Tzimtzum, since we're talking about before the Tzimtzum, where it's really only God, so the onlyness of God is a far deeper exclusiveness of only Hashem, nothing else but Him, and beyond all design and beyond all definition. And therefore, since Esses Spheres Agnuzais is on the most subtlest class, the beginning of a potential for 10 spheres, the sniffing power or the detective power of this intense microscope that can go in and find the tiniest little snag, if you might say, the tiniest little cut, the smallest little fissure in that, even on levels that are so hidden and so hidden and so obscured, it will pick up on it, and therefore it will not pass the test of oneness. If anything, it will give it a grade C, which is, as we said before, it's kadmon, but it's not echad, and it's definitely not yachid. But take the very same Esses Spheres Agnuzos, take that very same level and put it through the microscope, the lab, as we said last class, of post-tzimtzum, and put it through the test of oneness, give it a test of oneness in the microscope that is used after tzimtzum, which is a much more weaker microscope, which can compare infinitely less sharp, if you might say. So not only then such a level of oneness will pass the test, not only of Echad, but even Yachid. It will come out with a whopping score of oneness of Yachid, because you can't compare the expectations of pre-tzimtzum of oneness to the expectation of post-tzimtzum of oneness. That's all. I don't know if I'm really adding much more of a chiddush today, but it's just the way it was processing in my head, and I was excited to use the example of the microscopes. Okay, now we're ready to go. Please forgive. We give each other the opportunity to have a little bit of a good time. So that's what came to my head. I said, okay, let's run with it. Now we go Madrega base. So till now we discussed the first level of Antuchat, which is the 10 spheroids that are still before the Tzimtzum. But Madrega base, the second level, this is towards the end of chapter 29. When I say towards the end, it's about, I would say, like 15 lines before the end. So Madrega base on the second level of the Orin Sov or Shachas, Vizgalus Oiros La'acharat Tzimtzum. That's when the Oros, the lights, pass already through the powerful Tzimtzum. And that kind of, takes away and hides the Ein Sof, the real idea of Ein Sof, of infinity, and allows the lights now to come out in a much more limited fashion. So now when the lights are coming forth, after the Tzimtzum, which in this level, even though they're still considered a ray of the Ein Sof, it's still Ein Sof. It's an infinite light. The Kav is also infinite. But it's considered already a separated light. It's like separating challah, right? You have a dough and you take a piece of challah and you separate it. Even though it's the same dough, but it's already one piece that got separated from the entire bowl of dough. So in the same way over here, the 10 spheres hagnuzais are like the challah dough that you're going to separate before you separated it. It's still within the greater dough. Okay, then it's all you have is the greater dough. As you're going to look at it in the Or Ein Sof, it's the later 10 spheres while they're still embedded in the pure infinity of Ein Sof. Now what happened is that Ein Sof light was kind of mufrash, and it got, in a sense, it got like pulled off. It got separated because there's a tzimtzum that's disconnecting. Although the tzimtzum is not disconnecting completely, as we're going to see, that on the one hand, we learned the higher level of the tzimtzum. The first stage of the tzimtzum is a complete removal. There's a certain level of the Ein Sof that's totally removed, and nothing is left from it at all. Besides the Roshim, don't forget that. There's a mark. But besides that, everything was taken away. And now there is a tzimtzum, and the tzimtzum is a tzimtzum of miyut. Miyut meaning a reduction. But it's a very, very serious reduction. And since it's such a serious reduction, what is now emerging is considered completely separated from what was before. If this is already a afrasha, a separation of a ray of the Or Ein Sof, a matzal of the emanator. So this is almost like an emanation. It moved away from the emanator and now it's separated. And once this happens, then the 10 are already far more pronounced as individual spheres. Which on this state it says, Esa spheres belima, that there are 10 spheres already. You can, in the light, even before they go into vessels, you're already seeing 10 tinges in the light, 10 colors in the light. But it's still belima, which is what belima means, without substance. Which means shehein belima husadayin, they don't have yet a substance of something. So remember earlier he said that earlier in the first stage, when they're still in the embedded in the Or Ein Sof shalifnei hatzimtzum, over there it's not even b'pchenas metzios nikeres. You can't even recognize that there's 10. It's only chad. It's only one. Now they become a metzios nikeres. They become a recognizable metzios. You can already hear that there is 10 there, but it's not yet a metzios davar. It's not yet a metzios of something, and that's a subtle difference. There is metzios nikeres, a metzios that is recognizable, but not a metzios davar. It's not a substance yet of something. It's still belima husadayin. which means basically it's still a singular light. It's still one, but it's 10. So we're going to see. It's one because the source is still present. The source from where they come from is present and imposing a certain... In other words, because this... We're going to see in a second. Its oneness is not due to it itself. It itself is already... Since these genuzais, these 10 spheres that have been hidden, these potentials, are now actualized and they're coming out, so it's 10 already. There has been 10 potentials there and the 10 are coming out. So then why aren't they yet colored blue, green, yellow, purple, or whatever they are? Why is the chesed not red, the chesed not white and the gevura not red yet? The answer is because there's still a thread that's threading them to the Or Ein Sof before the tzimtzum. Why? Because remember we said before that the emergence of these sfirot from the pre-tzimtzum essa spheres agnuzais, from the state where they were hidden in the pre-tzimtzum infinite light, but when they were already essa spheres agnuzais, out into the post-tzimtzum state, is not through a complete cutoff. It's a tzimtzum, but it's a reduction. It's not a tzimtzum of a complete abandonment of what was before. So therefore, what is produced is not something totally new. If it would be produced as totally new, then the redness would come out as gevura, and the whiteness would come out as chesed. And we would see already the substance of the spheres. They would be already in a state of yesh me'ayin, like something from nothing. The somethingness of each, the character of each sphere would be already, crunchy. It would have a crunch already. It would be fermented, so to speak, into it. It would have a certain rigidity in its own existence already. But now it's still very fluid. And the reason it's very fluid is because it's almost like you look at it and you say, do I see Chachma? No, it's not Chachma. It's a teasing level. It like teases you to think that there's something there. You begin investigating, you begin sniffing. Do I smell chesed? And then, oh no, it's not. It's just plain simple light. But why is that? Why is it yeah and no? Because it's being influenced by its source. Since it's still a ray, there's still a thread continuing into the source, and in the source they were b'pchinas pshitus, they were completely pashut. Why were they pashut? Because then they were inseparable from the Or Ein Sof. They were chad mamish, as he said earlier, totally one. They were not in a state of mitzius. Since in their source, where they were before they were not in a state of mitzius, that influences, because they're still array, they're still shining out from their source. So even though when they go through the tzimtzum, it's a powerful reduction and hiding, and therefore limiting and bringing forth these hidden features to emerge more out into to that we can sense already the spheres over there. But yet you can sense, but you can't sense. They're yet and no at the same time. That's the idea of essa spheres. There are 10. You can't deny that you feel 10, but belima, you can't put your finger on it. It's still without a substance. Belima husadai. I know, what does that mean? By the way, this idea that essa sphere is belima is not in the same pattern. When I was reading this, I was getting a little confused. That's why I'm emphasizing it, because when you look at the passage of the Zohar of Pasach Eliyahu, the Pasach Eliyahu in the beginning says Antu chad v'lo b'chujbana. And when he speaks about the essa spheres over there, he doesn't make the statement essa spheres belima. Essa spheres belima is from a different statement of the Zohar. It's not in the same passage. But over here in the Maamor, he's just pointing out that the Zohar already is calling 10 spheres as 10 spheres, but yet, considering those spheres still in a state of belima, this is in the intermediate state of the journey of the essa spheres. In their primordial state, in their original, when they're still in the womb of the Ein Sof, then you can't even call them 10. Then on that we say chad v'lo b'chushban. However, how do you know there's 10? The very idea that you're screaming and shouting that there is chad, that there is one, What do you have to say that it's one? Who would think even that there's not one? Is because there is 10. But the 10 are so not 10 that they're all one. That's why you're saying there's only one. But the very fact that you have to say it's one is a sign that there is something disturbing over there, the oneness, but yet there's only one. You do an investigation, only one. But in the second stage, you will actually smell already, as we say, you can sniff already, something is emerged. There's already 10. You know there's 10. But when you try to put your finger on it and slam it down, this is what it is. No, it's elusive. It's almost like it goes into Chachma, but out of Chachma. It's almost like each one of these spheres can slip out of their image instantly. And this is basically the idea that we learned earlier, the concept, remember a few chapters ago, how these energies can be chesed, and then they can kind of change and go into the Hillel and Shammai's svaris can switch from one to the other. And we learned that's because when they went in the school of Shmai and Avtalion, the chesed and the gevura of Hillel and Shammai was not pronounced, so they're still affected by their source, right? So this is similar to that idea. But that idea is already, even after the lights go into the vessels, they're still undressable. Here we're talking even on a higher level, on a much higher level. When the lights are not in the vessels, and you have the tiniest beginnings of 10, yet it's not really, it's 10, but not 10. V'hainu, the koidim eslapshusam bikelim, before they enclothe themselves in vessels, they're still in a state of pshitus, of simplicity. Why? And he explains it. So how, and this is an important idea. A lot of times you have to be very careful in his words. Earlier, when he described the higher spheres, the Esa spheres gnuzos and their oneness, he says that the reason of their oneness is because they're chad be'etzem. They're essentially one. That means their essence. Their essence is that they're one with their one. In their essence, the Chachma, the Chesed are all one. Why? Because it's Ein Sof. There is no Chachma, there is no Chesed. There is the idea that he's wanting that it should be Chachma and Chesed. It should be later Chachma and Chesed. That kind of notion over here. And for that reason, it's Chad Be'etzem. Over here, however, they're one. It's still a level of oneness, but it's Echad, not Yachid. What does that mean? That the oneness is being caused not by them, but by an influence that is being projected onto them from their source. In other words, it's their previous state that is driving them to the oneness, as opposed to being one because of who they are. That's the difference in this stage. The Ma'achar, he explains over here. The Ma'achar shat tzimtzum b'chinas miyut. Since the tzimtzum is not a complete breakaway from what was before, that would be b'derech siluk. That would be a removal. It's b'derech miyut, only a reduction. Levat dahain. And therefore, shem chinas gilui hahelem. Therefore, they're not a yesh me'ayin. There's not something new. They're a continuation of what was before. It's only that before the potential was hidden and completely so hidden that it all practical purposes didn't exist. It exists when I'm saying all practical purposes, where practically doesn't exist, but it exists only in the sense that from it eventually will come spheres. That's kind of its existence. And yet, when now it came out, that potential came out. So it's a giloi, it's a revelation, hahelam of that concealment. B'sharsham and makayram, from their root and their source. V'harei makayram u'pchinas chad. Their source is one. V'loi b'chushban, and not in a state of chushban, not in a state of calculation. Canal. Okay, therefore, gamma oida shabo is galos. So therefore, also the lights that come out into emergence. Look at these words. Yeshbem is gabrus makayram. Their source is overpowering their own characterizations that that it becomes, even though they do have a color, their color is being canceled by the colorlessness of their source. That they themselves remain unmitziostic, not existence. And in a division, in a divisible way, where you can divide it and say this is chachma, this is chesed, this is gevura. Kamaimer now, and Kamaimer, as it says again, this statement isn't what he's going to state now, is in the Pasach Eliyahu, in continuation to the first state that he said, Antuchad v'loy b'chushban. So later it says, Antuchakim v'loy b'chachma yediyah, you are wise, but not with a knowable wisdom, which means not in a definable way of chachma. So he says that it's actually on this level. What do we mean by that? On the level of Esa Sphirais Hagnuzais, even though we said there's 10 Sphirais there, it's the beginning, it's the origins of 10 Sphirais. Over there we can't call it Chachma. There it's Chad. So there's no one is calling it Chachma, no one is calling it Bina. You can't call it by any of these names. It's interesting, we do call it by the name Malchus. But we do call it by the name Malchus, I think. That's not a characteristic of the Sphira, because in the Malchus is the Chachma. It's only the idea of Malchus because Malchus means that it has a shaykhus, it has a connection, it's a king over something, which means it's relating already outside. It's pulling towards the way God is going to relate to something, or relate to a world, or create a world. That's what's called Malchus. But the Sphira is in it. You don't call it. There's no Chachma there. There's no Bina there. This definitely can't be called Chachma and Bina. When can you start calling Chachma, Bina, and Spherois? When that hidden potential emerges, then you can already call it Chachma. Now, when those Spherois emerge and fully manifest in the Kelim, next stage number 3, then it's going to be called Chachma Yediyah. Then it's going to be a known Chachma. Known Chachma means over here, not that we can know it because it's still divine wisdom and it's still infinite wisdom, but it's still wisdom. We can say we know something about it, that it is wisdom. It has the character of wisdom. It's, however, the stage in between, the second stage, when you have the lights of the spheres, but no kalim, no vessels yet. So then the pshitus is so strong that even though it's 10, and even though you can say it already, it's the energy of Chachma, but loy b'chachma yediyah, it's not in any way definable as Chachma. That's the chidush that he's explaining over here. And that's what he explains. The Chakim Shayach Loimar, you can only say on him that he's Chakim, that he's wise. Ala or keshabab is galos dafka. Only when the light emerges out in the open. When the lights are still included and absorbed in the Orein Sof, it's not in a state of Chakim. Like we said earlier in chapter 19, that the spheroids, when they are embedded in the Ein Sof, are not at all in a state of sphirot yet. It's not Metzias Nikeres. Not only is it not Metzias Davar, a Metzias of something, an existence of something, it's not even a recognizable Metzias. Only when the lights come into a state of revelation, then you can call him Chakim. However, you immediately say, not with a knowable Chachma. Like, and what would be Chachma Yediyah, a knowable Chachma? Like the supernal Chachma of Atzilus. Because the Chachma of Atzilus, in the world of Atzilus, since the lights have already manifested in vessels, those vessels give it real character and brings out perhaps even the nuanced characteristic of the light and highlights it, and then you can call it Chachma Yediyah. Knowledge, knowable Chachma. But in this state, it's loy b'chachma Yediyah. It's Chachma, but not a Chachma Yediyah. Now, it's very important to note over here that this is the way he describes it in this Maamor. In other places in Chassidus, it's explained that even Chachma Vatzilus is not called Chachma Yediyah. The only Chachma Yediyah is the Chachma of the world of Bria. Because the Chachma of the world of Bria is already a creation type of an intellect. And since it's a creation type of intelligence, we can know it. The Chachma of Atzilus, although it's Chachma, it's so beyond anything we even, it's like there's no equation between his Chachma and our Chachma that we have to admit. We know there has to be a level of Chachma there, but we know nothing about it to the point that we can't even call it Chachma Yadiyah. We can't even say it's Chachma, but a very, very powerful Chachma. We can't even say that. Again, that's how it's explained in other places. But over here in this Maamor, it's explained that the real meaning of when we say, to the fullest meaning of when we say that something is Chakim, V'loi b'Chachma Yadiyah, it's actually referring to the levels of the oiros before they go into vessels. Then they are the lights themselves. They're not a Chachma Yadiyah, not a knowable Chachma, but in Atzilus they are Chachma Yadiyah. Ki Chachma u'pchenes pshitas adayin, because the Chachma is pashut. It's simple. Remember why? Really, it should have color. The reason it doesn't is because it's still emanating, it's still attached, it's still a ray shining from the pre-tzimtzum. And since it's a ha'ara, the or ain't so, and over there it was utterly pashut, therefore that pshitus is still felt over here. And like we said earlier, chapter 14, the level called the concealed chachma, which by the way, the level of chachma stima is the chachma of keser. Chachma, while it's in keter, before it goes into atzilus, it's called chachma stima, the hidden chachma. We learned about it earlier. And we said over there that it's we said it's higher than chachma as it is in atzilus. Gam legabe b'chinas chachma lo atzilus, even compared to, in other words, to chachma of atzilus, the chachma stima cannot even be called chachma. It's as if it's a different energy completely. It's not. No, it's chachma yelad atzilus looks up to chachma of keser, and wouldn't even know that it's chachma. It is so abstract and so hidden and so beyond the tziyur of chachma. Yet we can call it already antu chakim, but we have to say on it loy b'chachma yadiyah. It's not only in chachma; it's all the lights. Lights themselves are in a state of pshitus, of simplicity, chulu, and that we're holding now. We've completed chapter 29, Mazel Tov. All we have to do is the kitzer, the summary, which we'll leave for tomorrow, and then we continue and we start chapter 30, which is exciting because we're getting into the Lamets. Meanwhile, let Mashiach be revealed today.